person I'd like to introduce is from the Stop the War Coalition. He organises, he's the chief steward usually on all the demonstrations. He also does an amazing amount of campaigning, and he, like Kate, he's also involved in international coordination and the work that's been done to put this conference together. So please give a warm welcome to Chris Nineham.
Thanks very much. And just a few more words about, a few more thoughts about strategy, because I think we've all had very good discussions today. I think we're all agreed that we are moving, unfortunately, into a new phase of world politics, and that we're in a situation where the world is more violent, more volatile, and more dangerous than at any time for decades. Indeed, it is a world that has very worrying similarities to that that existed just over 100 years ago in the run-up to the outbreak of the First World War, as I think a number of speakers have talked about, and that gives an indication of the level of seriousness with which we must address this situation. Having said that, I think there is another side to the picture, which maybe we've discussed a little bit less, which is that it's also a moment where opposition to war in Britain, in Wales, internationally, is probably at a higher level than it ever has been in the last few hundred years. I mean, we've almost become used to it now, but in Britain, whenever there's talk about it, almost every time there's talk about the possibility of a new intervention, a new war, the opinion polls show 60, 70, 80% of the population actually opposing it. If you look at the impact that we've had partly over Palestine, we're now in a situation where the majority of people in Britain support the Palestinians, which is a thing unthinkable a couple of decades ago. And that's progress, and this is also an important factor in the situation which we've got to take into account. And actually, it does underline the point Pippa makes, which is that this fact makes it a reality that we can win, and that we need to act in such a way as that we're trying to win, and that we're actually trying to shape the world and have an impact on it. And I just want to make a few comments about how we should perhaps try and rise to this enormous challenge. And the first thing it seems to me is that we've got to recognise, many of us do, but not everyone does in the movement, and not everyone definitely beyond the movement recognises the fact that these wars are not aberrations, they're not accidents, they're not separate episodes as they're presented in the media, and nor in fact are the wars a product of a particular special period, the period of the Bush years, which ended with Obama, the period of Blair, the period when the lunatics appeared to take over the asylum. No, unfortunately, what's happened in the last few months has confirmed that this aggressive foreign policy, this series of wars, are structured into the system. They are actually a part of the kind of policy prescriptions. They're part of the project of our ruling classes, especially in Britain, if you think about it. I mean, Britain is a country which has the fourth biggest military in the world. It's the second biggest arms exporter, and it's also a country, the whole of whose political elite, pretty much, across the spectrum, regards the special relationship with the biggest imperialists in the world as being sacrosanct, as being crucial, as being a vital part of our foreign policy. And therefore, one important conclusion for me of this is that we have to have permanent anti-war organisation. We have to have dedicated anti-war networks in every town, in every city, preferably in every university, in every college, in every neighbourhood if we can, in order to be able to respond flexibly and in an ongoing way to this situation. And if we hadn't had, just to give you one example of the significance of this, if it wasn't the case that there are Stop the War groups in towns and cities up and down the country, that there are CND groups and PSC groups up and down the country, we would never have been able to have the massive pro-Palestine demonstrations that we've had in the last few months. Those demonstrations, 150,000 of a historic scale, they were contingent, they were dependent on there being local organisation to get the coaches on, to put the arguments, to produce the leaflets. I think we need to up the ante in this respect. And I also think that that we also need to recognise that we shouldn't consider ourselves as being marginal or being somehow outside of society. I mean, it struck me when we were marching through Newport, we had a lot of sympathy. There was, the ordinary people came out onto the streets, there was no hostility, there was a lot of support. Actually, I wish we'd had a movement big enough to go up and down every street in Newport over the last 3 or 4 weeks or months and talk to people about the situation and put up posters and have public meetings and so on. If we'd done that, I think the demonstration would be 3 or 4 times the size that it was. We have to get across that we need to relate to majorities here, and that means in every area again, constructing organisations that include people from the Labour Party, from the Green Party, from other political parties, from the trade unions, from the Muslim communities. There's Muslim communities in almost every city up and down the country. They're some of the best organised, most dynamic people. We need to be working with them on a week-by-week basis everywhere. Second, and the main other practical point I want to make is that I think we have to be very clear, very decisive, and very active in attacking government war propaganda, because they do keep repackaging, they do keep rebranding their wars, and they're trying to say to us now, we've discussed it, they're trying to say to us that the war, the crisis in Ukraine is a product of Putin's aggression. And I think we have to take this on and just say it's a lie. I'm no Putin supporter, but the reality of the situation is anyone who knows anything about the situation in Ukraine knows that this wouldn't be happening if it hadn't been for the expansion of NATO over the last 2-3 decades. And we have to get that argument across. Similarly, in Iraq, you know, they're trying to say that ISIS is this new threat, complete game changer. We all know, but we need to communicate the fact the situation, the civil war, ISIS in Iraq is a direct product of the occupation, the invasion, and what's happened over the last 8 or 9 years in that country. I think this is an argument we can win, and I'll end on this. I think it's an argument we can win with whole majorities. And I always think back to the situation in Iraq. I mean, before the Iraq war, you know, we wouldn't have believed that we'd be able to get the majority of people understanding that Iraq was a war for oil. But that's what people ended up saying, and therefore we were talking about a majority of people in this country becoming anti-imperialist. That's fantastic. When that opinion is mobilised, it can be incredibly potent. We stopped a new war in the Middle East, a new attack on the Middle East, last year when David Cameron tried to launch it over Syria. We can do so again, but we need to organise and we need to mobilise. Thank you.